The storm was howling outside, the wind pushing against the windows as if trying to tear the house apart. But inside, I was torn apart by something much worse. My husband of 40 years, my partner, my confidant, was walking out the door without a second thought, without a care. As he grabbed his coat, ready to leave me alone to face the hurricane, he said the words that shattered everything. Stop making a fuss. Barbara, Renee is the one who's really scared. She needs me. I stood there, frozen, my heart racing, a mix of fear and disbelief flooding my chest. The wind outside might have been fierce, but the devastation I felt in that moment cut deeper than any storm ever could. My husband, Alan, had been spending more and more time with Renee, his first love, the woman he hadn't seen in over 50 years. Ever since they'd reconnected, he seemed to forget everything he and I had built together. I begged him to stay. I'm terrified. Alan, I need you here, I pleaded, my voice trembling as I tried to hold on to the life we'd shared for decades. But he just looked at me with indifference, as though my words meant nothing. I can't leave her alone. Barbara, you'll be fine. And with that, he walked out into the storm, leaving me behind, shattered. The hurricane outside raged, but inside, a different kind of destruction was taking place. As the storm battered the house, I was left with nothing but the sound of the wind and the echo of Alan's words. Renee needed him more than I did. My mind raced as I thought back on the years we had spent together, all the love, all the sacrifices, and now I was nothing more than a distant memory. I had always believed that love, real love, meant loyalty, meant sticking together through thick and thin. But Alan's actions told me a different story. As the hours passed, my thoughts became clearer. He had made his choice, and it wasn't me. He was chasing something from his past, and I was left to pick up the pieces. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being abandoned not just by Alan, but by everything I had believed in. He had always promised me that no matter what happened, we would face everything together. We were supposed to grow old side by side, building memories in our twilight years, just as we had in our youth. But here I was, alone, watching the life we had built together crumble. Alan's words echoed in my mind. Renee needs me. He had been so clear about it, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. He had chosen her over me, over our years, our history. And what's worse, he didn't even seem to feel guilty about it. I tried to stay strong, tried to remind myself that the years we spent together weren't all for nothing. But every time I saw him leave for Renee, a bitter taste rose in my throat. I had once been the center of his world, the person he leaned on through thick and thin. Now, I was nothing more than a shadow in his past, overshadowed by a woman he hadn't seen in decades. I didn't understand how he could just turn his back on me so easily. The house felt colder now, emptier without Alan. Even the wind outside seemed to mock me, its howling louder as if to emphasize my solitude. I spent my days staring out the window, waiting for Alan to return, but I knew deep down that he wouldn't. His mind was consumed by Renee, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull him back. One evening, I reached for my phone and called our son, Daniel, hoping to find some comfort in his voice. Mom, you've been through so much. It's not too late to fix things, Daniel said, his voice full of concern. But I knew what he was really thinking. He didn't understand. How could he? How could anyone understand the hurt I felt for years? I had put Alan's needs before my own, making sure our family was cared for, making sacrifices so he could pursue his career. And now, in my time of need, he was choosing Renee. He was choosing her over me, over everything we had worked so hard to build. I can't just sit here and wait for him to come back. Daniel, I told him, my voice thick with emotion. He's made his choice. Daniel didn't argue. He knew there was no changing my mind, but the pain in my chest didn't ease. I had spent decades building a life with Alan. We had created something beautiful, something solid. And now, in the blink of an eye, it was all slipping away. The days blended together, and I found myself drifting through each one, as though I were walking through a fog. I tried to fill the emptiness with distractions, cooking meals, cleaning, reading, but nothing could replace the void Alan had left behind. I thought back to our younger days, when we had dreams and aspirations. We had been so full of life, so full of hope. We had promised each other that we would always be there, no matter what life threw our way. But now I was left with nothing but the hollow remnants of those promises. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee, I heard a familiar sound, Alan's voice, calling me from the doorway. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to face him, the sight of him standing there sending a surge of emotions through me. He looked tired, his face drawn, as if the weight of what had happened had finally caught up with him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his eyes searching mine for some sign that I would forgive him. "I've been a fool. I never should have let you feel this way." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how his actions had torn me apart. But instead, I just stared at him, numb. How could I forgive him? How could I forgive someone who had walked out on me? Someone who had chosen a past love over the life we had built together. You can't just apologize and make everything better. "Alan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You've already made your choice." He stepped closer, his hand outstretched, but I pulled back. The last time he had touched me, it had felt like a betrayal. His warmth now felt like a lie. "I don't want to be a part of this anymore," I said quietly, my heart heavy. "I don't want to be a placeholder in your life. I deserve more than that." Alan looked crushed. His shoulders slumped as he realized that I was done. But I had no more tears left to cry. I had given him everything I had, and he had taken it all for granted. That night, as the wind howled outside, I made a decision. I was done waiting. I was done being a part of his past. I deserved my own future, one without the constant shadow of Renee hanging over me. I would take back my life, piece by piece, and rebuild what I had lost. And if Alan couldn't see that, then it was his loss, not mine. The hurricane may have raged outside, but inside, I was finally at peace with my decision. I would face whatever came next, not as his wife, but as me, strong, independent, and ready to start over. It had been a few weeks since I made the decision to stand up for myself, to stop being a silent observer in my own life. Alan had not stopped seeing Renee, and I had stopped pretending it didn't hurt. He still came home late, his excuses growing thinner with every passing day. He would mention Renee, of course how she needed him, how she was struggling with her leg pain. The same leg pain that he had once treated with such tenderness when it was me who needed him. But now, whenever he came home, it was like he was a stranger, carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid things between us, and I was no longer willing to carry them alone. I tried to move on as best as I could. I began to keep myself busy, taking up activities that once brought me joy, things I had put aside for the sake of our family, for the sake of Alan. I enrolled in a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I joined a local book club and made time for long walks in the park. But no matter how much I filled my days, there was still an ache deep inside me, a hollow space where love and trust once lived. One morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on the porch, I saw a post on the local community group online. It was from a man named Hugh, asking for help to find his mother's first love. His mother had met her first love when they were teenagers, but life had separated them, and now, 50 years later, she was still holding on to the memory of him. The post struck me. I was moved by the love story that had spanned decades. But what truly hit me was when I saw the man's name. The man they were searching for was none other than Alan. At first, I felt a sense of betrayal wash over me. How could he not tell me? How could he not share this with me, knowing how much this woman meant to him? It seemed to explain so much the way he had been consumed by his memories of the past, the way he kept disappearing to meet Renee, the way his eyes would light up when he spoke of her. My heart clenched as I stared at the picture of the two of them, young and in love. I had always thought our love was enough to sustain us, but here was the truth, staring me in the face. I was not the one he truly loved. The realization hit me hard. I was a chapter in his story, yes, but I was not the one he longed for. I was the one he had settled for. And now, after all these years, I had to let go. But it wasn't just Alan I had to let go of. It was the life I had built with him. The shared memories, the dreams, the quiet evenings spent together. They all seemed so distant now, like a story that belonged to someone else. I decided to confront him. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore, pretending everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't. That evening, as he walked through the door, I knew it was time. I saw Hugh's post. I said, my voice calm but steady, "You never told me about Renee, about the fact that you've been looking for her." Alan froze, the color draining from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the guilt in his eyes, and for a moment, I felt something shift in me. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could do this to me, but instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "Why?" "Alan, why didn't you tell me?" He stepped forward, his hand reaching out as if to comfort me, but I pulled away. "It's not what you think. Barbara, I never meant to hurt you. Renee and I." "No," I interrupted, my voice rising. "It's not about what you meant. It's about what's happening right now. You've been leaving me behind. Alan, I've been sitting here, waiting for you to come back. But you're not coming back. You're already gone." Alan's face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting him. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. When I found Renee again, it brought back all these feelings. She was my first love, Barbara. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. I've spent so many years with you. You've been my partner, my family. I don't want to lose that." But it was too late. The damage had already been done. I had spent the last few weeks slowly coming to terms with the truth. Alan had chosen Renee, and he hadn't even realized he had chosen her long before I found out. I was no longer a priority in his life, and as much as it hurt, I couldn't continue to play the role of his backup. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice steady. "I need to move on. I deserve to be with someone who chooses me, someone who sees me as more than just a chapter in their past." Alan stood there, speechless, his face pale as he realized the finality of my words. "I love you, Barbara," he whispered, but it was too late for love. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for him to come back, and I wasn't going to stay in this limbo of half-truths and false hope. I would move on for myself and for the future that I still had ahead of me. I wasn't sure where life would take me, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to waste any more time on someone who had already chosen his past over me. The next day, I filed for divorce, and though the process was painful, it was also liberating. I was finally taking control of my life again, no longer waiting for someone who would never come back. The weeks after filing for divorce passed in a blur, each day dragging on longer than the last. But despite the pain of it all, I couldn't deny the relief that slowly settled within me. I had made the decision to let go of Alan, to finally stop fighting for a love that had faded long ago. And though the divorce was still fresh, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Alan, on the other hand, didn't seem to be handling things as well. He tried to reach out, sending texts, leaving voicemails, and even showing up at my door once or twice, but I ignored him. Each time I saw his name flash on my phone, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. He had hurt me in ways I couldn't even put into words, and now, as if nothing had changed, he was trying to worm his way back into my life. There was a time when I would have welcomed him back with open arms, when the thought of life without him was unbearable. But now, I saw the truth clearly. He had chosen Renee, and that choice was final. He couldn't have both of us, no matter how much he tried to convince me that I was still important to him. His actions had already spoken louder than his words ever could. One evening, after another long day of ignoring his calls, I received a message that I didn't expect. It was from our son, Daniel. He had called me earlier that day, but I had been too busy to pick up. As I read his message, a knot formed in my stomach. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's about Dad." I sighed, unsure of what to expect. Alan and I had always tried to keep our issues separate from Daniel, but I knew that was becoming increasingly difficult. Our son had always been sensitive to our relationship. Even as a child, he had seen the good, the bad, and now the ugly. It broke my heart to know that our divorce was hurting him too. When I called Daniel back, he answered immediately. There was a note of urgency in his voice that made my stomach twist. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his tone soft but filled with concern. "I'm fine," I replied, trying to sound calm, though I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. "What's going on?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I think you should know that Dad's really struggling. He's been going to therapy, trying to work through things, but he's just lost. He's not the same." "Mom, I know it's hard to hear, but I think he's really torn up about what happened between you two." Torn up? I couldn't help but scoff at the thought. Where had that torn-up person been when I needed him? Where was the man who promised me he would stand by me through everything, who vowed to never hurt me if he was so torn up? Why had he abandoned me when the storm hit? Literally and figuratively, "Daniel," I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "I know you love your dad, but he made his choice. It wasn't just about Renee. It was about how he treated me, how he turned his back on me when I needed him the most. I can't keep holding on to that." "I understand, Mom," Daniel said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm not taking sides. I just want both of you to be okay." I felt a swell of gratitude for my son, but also a deep sadness. Daniel deserved so much more than the fallout of our broken marriage. He didn't deserve the emotional toll it was taking on him. But there was nothing I could do to take that pain away. All I could do was move forward for both of us. Later that evening, I sat alone in the quiet house that had once been filled with the laughter of our family. It felt strange, almost alien now. I thought about Alan, his face, his smile, and how everything had once felt so perfect. But those memories were fading, and all that remained was the person I had become in the aftermath of it all, stronger. Yes, but also harder. As I sat there, I felt the weight of the years we had spent together. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and compromise. But it wasn't enough. Not when he had chosen someone else over me. Not when he had been so easily swayed by the past, letting it dictate his future, ignoring the life we had shared. I knew that I would always love him, in some part of me. That was the hard truth of it all. You can't spend decades with someone and not have a piece of your heart still belong to them. But I also knew that love wasn't enough. Not anymore. The storm had passed, and so had our marriage. What remained now was the life I was going to build for myself, one that didn't rely on Alan or anyone else for my happiness. It was time for me to find joy in my own company, in the things that made me feel whole again. I spent the next few days making plans. I didn't want to stay in the house forever, surrounded by memories of a life that no longer existed. I needed to leave, to create new memories in new places. The world was still out there, waiting for me to discover it. I signed up for a painting class, something I had always dreamed of doing, but never had the chance. I made a list of the places I wanted to visit, the things I wanted to experience. The world was wide, and I was going to embrace it fully, with or without Alan. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days of loneliness, days when the memories would creep in, trying to pull me back. But I was ready. I was ready to face the world as the person I was meant to be, not the person I had been when Alan and I were together. And with that, I stepped into the future, leaving the past where it belonged, behind me. The days following my decision to file for divorce felt like a strange, unsettling calm had settled over the house. Alan was still around, but his presence no longer felt like home. It felt like an obligation, an echo of something that used to be warm and comforting. But now, it was just an empty shell of what we had built together, despite everything. I couldn't shake the sense of disappointment that lingered in the air between us. I had always believed that love meant loyalty, meant standing by each other no matter what. But here I was, standing alone, feeling more abandoned than ever. Alan had chosen Renee, his first love, over the life we had built, over the years of sacrifices, of moments shared, of memories we had made together. And though part of me still loved him, I knew that love was no longer enough. I could no longer be the second choice in someone else's life. Days turned into weeks. And though I tried to keep myself busy, I couldn't escape the emptiness I felt. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to do, but had put off for years. The quiet rhythm of brushing color onto canvas brought me some solace. But no matter how many colors I splashed onto the canvas, nothing could fill the void that Alan had left behind. He still came home late, his excuses growing thinner and more desperate with each passing day. But every time he looked at me, I saw the distance in his eyes. It was clear he was no longer the man I had married. The man I had spent decades loving had left me behind, long before he walked out the door for Renee, one day while I was tidying up the living room. I found a letter. It was from Alan, written in his familiar, neat handwriting. The letter was a plea, asking me to reconsider, to come back to him, to let go of the divorce. As I read his words, I felt a strange sense of numbness wash over me. He spoke of the good times, of the years we had spent together, but there was no apology in his words, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused me. He still couldn't see that his betrayal had destroyed everything. He still thought that love alone would fix everything, that a few nice words would erase the hurt. "I know I've made mistakes," he wrote, "but I can't imagine my life without you in it. I need you. Barbara, please come back." I put the letter down, my hands shaking. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to go back to the way things were, to forget the past few months, to let the hurt fade away. But I knew that I couldn't, not anymore. The truth was too clear. Alan was no longer the man I had married. He was a man who had chosen his past over me. And though I had spent so many years loving him, it was time for me to let go. I called Daniel, unsure of what I was even hoping for. When he answered, I could hear the concern in his voice. "Mom, is everything okay? I don't know what to do anymore." "Daniel," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Alan is still here, still asking for me to come back. He's saying all the right things, but I can't ignore what he did. I don't know if I can trust him anymore." Daniel was silent for a moment before responding. "Mom, you've been through so much. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who chooses you, not someone who's looking over his shoulder at the past." His words struck me deeply, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. My son was right. I deserved more than this, more than being stuck in a marriage where I was constantly competing with a ghost from Alan's past. I had spent so much of my life putting Alan's needs above my own, always trying to make him happy, always trying to keep the peace. But in doing so, I had forgotten about myself, about what I needed. Later that evening, as Alan came home, I knew what I had to do. I stood in the doorway, watching him walk toward me, his face tired but hopeful. He had been waiting for me to soften, to give in, but I was done. "Alan," I began, my voice steady but firm, "I've made my decision. The divorce is final. I can't keep waiting for you to choose me. You've already chosen someone else. I deserve a life where I'm not second to someone from your past. I've given you everything, but I can't give you any more. Not like this." He stood there, speechless, his face drained of color. The man I had loved for so long finally seemed to realize the gravity of what he had lost. But it was too late. The years of trust had been shattered. The love I once had for him had been replaced with something colder, something that could never be undone. "I understand," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." But those words didn't mean anything anymore. I had heard them too many times before. I had heard them during the quiet moments when I asked him to stay, when I begged him to care, to put me first. Now, they were nothing but empty sounds. I turned away from him, walking toward the door. "Goodbye, Alan," I said, my voice steady as I stepped out into the future that no longer included him. And as I left, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had finally made my peace, not because I had forgiven him, but because I had found the strength to let go. It was hard to explain to anyone, but the silence in the house after the divorce was almost unbearable. The empty space between Alan and me was filled with an unsettling quiet, a vast void that no one could ignore. Alan had left, not physically, but emotionally. He spent his days with Renee, the woman he had reunited with after 50 years. I had once been his world, the one he cherished. But now, it seemed as if I had never existed in the same way. The bond we once shared had been replaced by memories of a past that no longer seemed to belong to me. The days stretched out endlessly, and yet I knew that I couldn't let myself be consumed by bitterness. I had to move forward. I had always been a person who found solace in routine, in doing things with purpose. But now, the routine felt hollow. I would wake up early, prepare breakfast, and still, the house felt empty. There were no more arguments over trivial things, no more discussions about the children, no more plans for the future. I would find myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window, wondering how I had ended up here. How had the love of my life become a stranger? How had I become so invisible to him I didn't want to feel sorry for myself? But some days, it was impossible not to. I had spent decades building a life with Alan, a life that had seemed perfect in its simplicity. But now, after everything had crumbled, I realized that the love I thought we had shared had been a facade. We had built our life on compromises, on staying silent through the hard times, on pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. And for the first time, I was forced to confront the reality that our love had never been as strong as I had believed. One afternoon, while I was cleaning out some of the old boxes in the attic, I came across a small, worn photograph album. I hadn't seen it in years. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed with time, but as I opened it, memories flooded back. It was a collection of photos from our early days together, back when we were both young and full of dreams. There were pictures of our wedding day, of our children when they were babies, of our first house. Flipping through the album, I felt a pang of longing for the way things used to be, for the love that had once been so vibrant and alive. But I couldn't go back. I had to remind myself that it wasn't just Alan who had changed, it was me too. I had spent so many years focusing on him, on our family, on keeping everything together. I had put my own needs and desires on the back burner, convincing myself that this was what love required. But now, I saw things differently. Love wasn't just about sacrifice. It was about growth, about sharing a future together, not one person waiting in the shadows while the other chases a dream that no longer exists. It wasn't until I received a letter from Renee that I truly understood the depth of the situation. I had expected it eventually, but seeing her handwriting on the envelope made it real. I hadn't spoken to her since the night Alan had walked out. There had been no words between us, only the strange silence that had settled over the entire situation. But as I tore open the envelope, her words were as clear as day. "Barbara, I know what you must be feeling, and I can't begin to imagine the pain I've caused. Alan and I reconnected after so many years, and I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to explain that I never intended to take him away from you. I'm sorry." As I read her letter, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't angry with her. I had been angry at Alan for so long that it had become a habit, but I realized now that it wasn't just his fault. We had all played a part in this. I had buried my own needs for years, hoping that things would get better, that the love we once shared would return. But it hadn't, and I had to accept that. The letter wasn't an apology that would make everything right, but it was an acknowledgement of the hurt that had been caused. It was more than I had expected from either of them. Alan had never really apologized, not in a way that made sense to me, but Renee, in her own way, had given me the closure I didn't even know I needed. I put the letter down and sat in silence for a long time. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. I had spent so many years letting my life be defined by others, by Alan, by our family, by expectations. Now, I was ready to define it for myself. I didn't know what that looked like yet, but I would figure it out, one step at a time. That evening, as I went for a walk around the neighborhood, I realized that something had shifted within me. The anger and pain I had felt so intensely in the beginning had softened into something quieter, more peaceful. The world was still out there, and it was waiting for me to live my life, not as Alan's wife or as someone else's past, but as me. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions, a strange mix of relief and pain. Alan and I were no longer speaking, and though the silence in the house was deafening, I couldn't bring myself to regret the decision I had made. I had spent so many years waiting for him, for our relationship to return to what it had once been. But deep down, I knew it was never going to happen. The years we had spent together, the love I thought was unbreakable, had all been replaced by an ache in my chest, a wound that refused to heal. I kept myself busy with work, with household chores, and with the small things that filled the hours, but the emptiness in my heart was harder to ignore. Every evening, when I sat down at the dinner table, I could still hear the echo of Alan's voice, still feel his presence as though he was just in the other room, but it wasn't real. He wasn't coming back, not the way he had been before. The man I once knew was long gone, replaced by someone I couldn't even recognize. One evening, after yet another lonely dinner, I sat by the window, staring out into the night. The moon was full, casting a soft glow over the neighborhood, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel quite so alone. It wasn't that I was no longer sad or angry. It was that I had begun to accept what had happened. Alan had made his choice, and no matter how much I wished for things to be different, they weren't. The life we had built together was over, and I had to find a way to move on without him. It wasn't easy. I would never pretend that it was. There were moments when I would hear a familiar song on the radio and be transported back to the days when things were simpler, when Alan and I were in love and the future seemed bright. But those moments were becoming fewer, and slowly, I started to find comfort in the quiet, in the silence that had once felt suffocating. I began to see an opportunity for change. I started to reconnect with parts of myself. I had long forgotten parts of me that had been buried under the weight of my responsibilities as a wife and a mother. I took up painting again, something I had loved when I was younger, but had put aside in favor of taking care of everyone else. I started volunteering at a local shelter, meeting new people, hearing their stories, and remembering what it felt like to truly make a difference. And for the first time in a long while, I began to feel something that wasn't tied to Alan Joy. Still, there were moments when the loneliness would creep in, when I would catch myself wishing that things had turned out differently. I had spent so many years with Alan that it was hard to imagine life without him, even though I knew it was exactly what I needed. But even in those moments of weakness, I reminded myself that I was stronger than I had been before. I was no longer living for someone else. I was living for me. Then, one day, I received a message from Daniel. My heart skipped a beat as I read his words. Mom, I know it's been hard, but I think it's time you start moving forward. Dad has made his choice, and you need to make yours. I didn't know what to make of it at first. Daniel had always been protective of me, and I knew he meant well, but as I sat there, thinking about it, I realized he was right. For so long, I had been stuck in the past, clinging to memories of a love that no longer existed. I had allowed Alan's decisions to dictate the course of my life, but no more. It was time to let go. I made a decision that day. I was going to take control of my future. I was going to stop waiting for Alan to come back, to stop looking for signs that things might change. I wasn't going to waste any more time on someone who couldn't see what was right in front of him. It was time to start living again, and I wasn't going to do it alone. I began making plans, small ones at first. I booked a trip to the coast, somewhere I had always wanted to go but had never found the time for. I started planning my future, not in relation to Alan, but as the woman I had always been underneath all the years of being his wife. I didn't know what was ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. The future was mine to shape, and I wasn't going to waste it. And then, just as I was beginning to find peace, I heard a knock at the door. It was Alan. I had been expecting it, but when the moment finally came, I wasn't sure how I would react. His face looked different, tired, worn, as if he had been carrying a burden for far too long. But there was something else in his eyes, regret. "I've made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "I should have never let you go. I should have never let Renee come between us." For a moment, I stood there, unsure of what to say. The pain I had felt was still there, but something had changed inside me. I wasn't the same person who had married Alan all those years ago. I wasn't the same woman who had clung to the idea of a love that no longer existed. "I've moved on, Alan," I said softly, my voice steady, "and I think you need to as well. I'm not the person I was when we first met, and neither are you." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. He didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if he had finally accepted the truth. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry," he said, "for everything." I didn't know what to say. I had already said goodbye in my heart. The man standing before me was a stranger, someone who had hurt me, but who had also taught me something about myself. I had learned that I was capable of more than I thought. I was capable of moving on, of rebuilding my life, of finding happiness on my own terms. "I know," I said, my voice calm. "Goodbye, Alan." And with that, I closed the door behind him, not with anger, but with a sense of finality. I had done what I needed to do. I had found the strength to walk away, and now it was time to move forward. The days after Alan's departure felt long, like I was caught in a storm of my own emotions. I had thought that once the decision was made, once the divorce papers were filed, I would feel relief. And in some ways, I did. There was a sense of freedom, a small glimmer of peace in knowing that I was no longer tethered to someone who had chosen the past over the present. But there was also a deep sadness, a hollow ache that lingered. I couldn't simply erase the life we had built, the years of love and sacrifice, and the dreams we had shared. It felt like I had lost more than just a partner. I had lost a part of myself in the process. As the weeks passed, I found myself going through the motions, working, running errands, taking care of daily tasks, but it was as if everything had become automatic. The house, once filled with the sound of laughter, of family dinners, was now eerily silent. Alan had left, but so had the life we had shared. Even though the divorce had given me a sense of control, it had also left me with an overwhelming emptiness. I spent my evenings sitting in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of the life we had built together, wondering where it had all gone wrong. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out some of Alan's old things, I came across a letter. It was addressed to me, and my heart skipped a beat as I recognized his handwriting. I hadn't expected to hear from him again, not after everything that had happened. But as I opened the letter, I felt a mixture of curiosity and dread. I couldn't help but wonder what he would say. What could he possibly say after everything? The letter was short but heartfelt. Alan wrote about how sorry he was, how he had never meant to hurt me, how he had lost sight of what was truly important. He spoke of his time with Renee, of how their reconnection had taken him back to a place he thought he had long buried, but also of how he had realized that he couldn't escape the truth. I made a mistake. He wrote, "I lost you, Barbara, and I can't change that. But I want you to know that I will always love you. I'll always be here, even if we can't go back to what we were." As I read his words, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe him, to forgive him, to try and rebuild what we once had. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, knew that it wasn't enough. His apology, though genuine, couldn't undo the years of neglect, the betrayal that had driven us to this point. The man who had once promised to love me forever had chosen to chase a ghost from his past instead. And now, no matter how much I might still love him, I knew that I couldn't go back to a relationship built on broken trust. I folded the letter and set it aside, feeling the weight of its words, but also feeling the need to move on. I couldn't let myself be dragged back into the past, not after everything I had gone through. I had spent so many years caring for Alan, making sacrifices for our family, and now it was time to put myself first. I had to find a way to live my life without him, to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost along the way. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, I started to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people I hadn't seen in years. I joined a community group, helping with various projects, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making a difference again. I took up painting, a hobby I had abandoned long ago, and found joy in the quiet moments of creativity. But more than anything, I found solace in my own company. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole on my own. And then, one day, I received a call from Daniel, my son, who had been so concerned about the state of our family, finally reached out. His voice was soft, and I could hear the concern in his tone. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know it's been hard, but I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I know Dad's been calling you, but I think it's time you really let go. He made his choice, and now you need to make yours." His words hit me like a wave, washing away the remnants of doubt I had been clinging to. Daniel was right. I had spent so much time focusing on what I had lost, but in doing so, I had neglected what I still had: my life, my future, my ability to move forward. Alan's choices were his own, and I couldn't keep holding on to someone who had already moved on. That evening, I sat in the living room, the same room where Alan and I had shared so many years, and I made a decision. It was time to let go, once and for all. I couldn't keep living in the past, waiting for something that would never come back. I had spent too much of my life looking after others, trying to fix everything that was broken. But now, it was time to fix myself. I called Alan later that night, my heart heavy but resolute. I'm done. Alan, I've moved on. I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to move forward, and I'm doing it without you. There was silence on the other end of the line, but I could almost hear the regret in his voice. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I had already made up my mind. I had spent too long looking for closure, but I realized now that closure didn't come from someone else. It came from within. The storm had passed. I was no longer waiting for the winds to change. I was standing firm, ready to walk into a future that was mine, ready to live a life I had long put on hold. Life has a way of presenting us with moments that challenge us, moments that test our strength and our capacity for forgiveness. After everything that had happened between Alan and me, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The man I had spent 40 years with, the man I had loved deeply, had made choices that left me broken. And yet, despite the pain, I had to make a choice of my own to continue living in the past or to move forward into the future, free from the weight of betrayal. It wasn't easy. Every part of me wanted to hold on to the love we once shared, to believe that things could go back to the way they were. But the truth was clear. I couldn't change him. I could only change myself. I chose to let go, to embrace the future and create a life that was mine to shape, free from the shadows of the past. The most powerful thing you can do when life hurts you is to let go. Let go of the past, of what you cannot change, and make space for new beginnings. You are worthy of happiness, peace, and love that doesn't come with conditions. The strength to move on comes from within, and when you choose yourself, you open the door to healing and growth. If you've ever faced a moment of betrayal or a life-altering decision, remember that you are not alone. Leave a comment below and share your story with us. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories and life lessons that will inspire and empower you. You deserve to walk confidently into your future. Let's do it together.